The millionaire father returned unexpectedly on his daughter's birthday and froze in shock when he saw his 7-year-old daughter, paralyzed in both legs, pushed out of her wheelchair by her stepmother. Her purple dress was soaked, and she trembled as she struggled to kneel in the middle of the yard. The woman's cold hand tilted a bottle of water and poured it straight over the child's head, scolding her while crushing what little trust remained. Between sobs, the girl choked and coughed, her voice desperate as she pleaded, "Mom, I can't breathe." At that very moment, the father's thunderous shout ripped through the false facade, exposing a horrifying truth about the crimes hidden inside that luxurious mansion. The afternoon in the suburbs of New York passed in silence. In the garden behind the mansion, Lily Hayes sat quietly in her wheelchair. The 7-year-old girl, with brown hair falling over her shoulders, had bright yet sorrowful eyes. Lily clutched an old teddy bear tightly to her chest, the last gift her mother had left before passing away from cancer. Her unmoving legs beneath the small purple dress always made her feel different from other children. From inside the house came the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. Claudia Reed, Alexander's second wife, was entertaining 2 close friends. The 35-year-old woman wore an elegant red dress, her wavy blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile a blend of charm and pride. To her guests, Claudia was the picture of a model wife, graceful and skilled at maintaining the image of a wealthy family. "Alex is as busy as always," Claudia said with a light laugh, raising her glass of wine. "He's away on a business trip, but don't worry, Lily is doing just fine. I take good care of her." The words were spoken with a sweet tone, yet outside the glass door, Lily heard everything. She bit her lip softly, her fingers tightening around the teddy bear. In her heart, she knew the truth was nothing like the picture Claudia had just painted. Sandra Collins, the longtime housekeeper, walked past and leaned toward Lily. Her voice was low, just enough for the two of them to hear. "Stay put here. If the guests see you all messy, the mistress will be furious." Lily nodded faintly, her throat tightening. She lowered her head, trying to suppress the cough that threatened to rise, afraid the sound would draw Claudia's attention. A phone rang from the living room. Claudia glanced at the screen and smiled brightly. "It's Alexander calling." She quickly switched to video mode. On the screen appeared the face of a 40-year-old man, dignified, his expression weary yet warm. Alexander Hayes, Lily's father, a wealthy businessman, had buried himself in work ever since his wife passed away, trying to use busyness to cover the emptiness of grief. "Claudia, are you doing well? And where's Lily?" Alexander asked, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for his daughter. Claudia angled the phone cleverly, letting Lily appear only briefly in the corner of the screen, sitting in her wheelchair, teddy bear in her arms. Almost instantly, she shifted the camera away and said softly with a smile, "You see, she's tired. Let her rest. Don't worry, I'm taking care of everything." Alexander sighed. "All right, thank you. I'll be home as soon as I can." The screen went dark. In that brief instant, Lily wanted to cry out, "Dad, I miss you." But her lips trembled. Her throat felt blocked. All she could do was clutch her small teddy bear tightly, as if letting go would mean the memory of her mother and her father's love would vanish with it. Laughter still echoed inside the house, each burst like an invisible blade cutting deeper into her heart. When the guests finally left, the atmosphere in the mansion grew heavy. Claudia had seen them out with a radiant smile, but the moment the door closed, that smile disappeared. She slammed the door shut. The harsh sound made Lily flinch. Her high heels struck sharply against the floor as she strode quickly toward the backyard. Her cold, piercing eyes locked on Lily, who sat silently in her wheelchair, sweat-matted hair clinging to her forehead. "What are you doing sitting here?" Her voice was ice, each word hissing through clenched teeth. "Do you think you're some kind of princess?" Lily trembled, hugging her teddy bear even tighter. Tears threatened to fall, but she forced them back, knowing that if she cried, everything would only get worse. Claudia's chilling gaze pierced through the silence, turning the quiet yard into the starting point of the dark days that awaited Lily. Claudia leaned down close to Lily's face, her breath heavy with the smell of wine blowing straight at her. Her eyes flashed with contempt, her hand gripping the wheelchair armrest as if she wanted to crush it. Lily trembled, clutching her teddy bear tightly to her chest, her heart pounding, but her lips stayed pressed together. The next morning, as dawn touched the glass windows, the sound of an engine echoed from the gate. Alexander Hayes had decided to return earlier than planned. The night before, during a video call with Claudia, he had seen only a glimpse of his daughter before she was quickly blocked from view. Claudia's forced smile wasn't enough to chase away the unease rising inside him. A strange instinct wouldn't let him rest, and there was another reason that pushed him to leave immediately. Today was Lily's birthday. He wanted to hand her the gift himself, to see her real smile, not one filtered through a phone screen. The black luxury car rolled slowly up the driveway. The 40-year-old man, tall and broad-shouldered, stepped out in a white suit that fit him perfectly, carrying a carefully wrapped gift box. Inside was a new doll, one he had chosen with care during his trip, hoping it would make Lily smile again. On the way home, he kept wondering to himself, would she still like dolls? When she was little, just one doll was enough for her to hold it all day long. The longing for his daughter made Alexander impatient, his strides longer and sharper. As he drew closer to the yard, a harsh voice stopped him in his tracks. "Stand up, you useless thing," sitting there crying. "What good does that do? You're nothing but a burden. Yesterday, you made me look like a fool. You should just disappear from here." Alexander quickened his pace, his chest suddenly heavy. Through the trees, the scene appeared before him like a knife stabbing straight into his eyes. Claudia, in a tight red dress, her face twisted with fury, yanked the wheelchair forward to the doorway. Then, without warning, she shoved Lily out, sending her crashing onto the tiled ground. In her hand, Claudia flipped a bottle of cold water upside down and poured it directly over the little girl struggling to get up. She kept pouring as she spat her words, each one cutting like a blade into the child's small heart. "You cursed cripple. You dragged nothing but shame into this house. If it weren't for you, I would have had peace long ago. You're nothing but a shadow, always sitting there, waiting for people's pity." Lily coughed violently, gasping as she tried to shield her face with her hands. Her voice broke in a desperate plea. "Mom, I can't breathe." Her purple dress clung to her soaked body, heavy with water. Her trembling hands still reached out for the worn teddy bear she had been holding, as if it were the only shield left between her and the cruelty bearing down on her. She poured more water, her voice shrill. "You are nothing but trash. Living is useless, worthless." Sandra Collins, the housekeeper, stood on the doorstep. She crossed her arms, her eyes cold and detached, not lifting a finger to intervene, as if this were an ordinary scene. Alexander froze in shock, his whole body stiffening. In that instant, the gift box in his hand slipped to the ground. The wrapping paper tore open, and a brand new doll rolled across the floor, its plastic face cracking with a fine line. The sharp sound of the break rang out like a hammer striking his heart. He took another step forward, his breathing heavy, his eyes bloodshot. In his mind surged the image of his late wife, her gentle gaze as she cradled Lily in her arms. Pain, regret, and rage rose together, choking him. "Stop!" his shout thundered through the courtyard. Claudia flinched and spun around. Water still dripped from her hand, trailing down to the tiled floor. Sandra recoiled in alarm, while Lily looked up, her frightened eyes filled with astonishment as she gazed at her father. In that moment, the air tightened, every gaze fixed on Alexander, the father who had just returned, erupting with fury and anguish, so raw it nearly crushed him. Alexander hurried forward, kneeling down to lift his daughter into his arms. Her small body was ice cold, the purple dress soaked through, and her teddy bear had fallen onto the ground, lying in the puddle. Alexander held her tightly, trying to keep her from trembling. "Dad, Dad," Lily whispered, her voice breaking, her wide eyes filled with panic. Alexander raised his head, his voice low, choked, but firm. "Claudia, what did you just do to my daughter?" Claudia immediately stepped back, her hands trembling as if she herself were frightened. Her face twisted for a few seconds, then quickly shifted into an expression of distress. Unexpected tears welled up, and her shaky voice broke the silence. When did you get back?" I was only teaching her. The girl is too stubborn. She doesn't listen. You misunderstood." Alexander stared at her, his brows drawn together. He did not answer, only tightened his hold on Lily, feeling each faint breath. Inside him rose a storm of anger and confusion. From inside the house, a man's voice called out. The door opened, and Marcus Reed stepped outside, carrying a black briefcase. Marcus was Claudia's cousin, in his mid-30s, with sharp features, a confident gaze, and always dressed impeccably like a successful financial advisor. "Alex," Marcus said in a calm, deep voice, "don't be so harsh. Children need discipline if they're going to grow strong. Maybe you just happened to walk in on a moment. It doesn't show the whole picture." Alexander narrowed his eyes at Marcus, his expression darkening. "Discipline? You call this discipline? Pushing a disabled child to the ground, pouring cold water on her? Is that what you call discipline?" Marcus set his briefcase on the porch table and shrugged. "You know, Lily needs to toughen up. If she doesn't, she'll stay weak forever. I believe Claudia only wants what's best for her." Claudia quickly interjected, her trembling hand brushing lightly against Alexander's shoulder. "Alex, you don't understand. I never meant to hurt her. I only wanted her to learn how to endure." Alexander pushed Claudia's hand away, his voice hoarse. "Endure? She's 7 years old, Claudia. She doesn't need to endure. She needs to be loved." In her father's arms, Lily trembled, her tear-filled eyes fixed on him as if she wanted to say something. But just as her lips parted slightly, Claudia leaned down close to Lily's ear. A fake smile curved her lips, while her cold, sharp eyes delivered the threat. "If you dare say a single word, you will regret it." Lily jolted in fear, tears streaming down her face. Her lips clamped shut, and she turned her head into her father's chest, clutching his collar tightly, not daring to speak. Alexander could feel his daughter's fear. Stunned, he asked himself, had he been mistaken? Was this all just a misunderstanding? But then why was the child shaking so violently? Why were her eyes filled with such terror? A heavy silence settled over the courtyard. Claudia kept crying. Marcus appeared calm, while Sandra stood quietly on the doorstep, her eyes avoiding the scene as if it had nothing to do with her. Alexander drew in a deep breath, his hand gently brushing back Lily's wet hair. He wanted to reassure her, yet his heart felt crushed. Rage and doubt clashed violently inside him. "You'll be okay, Lily. Daddy is here now," he whispered. But at that very moment, the small body in his arms suddenly convulsed. Lily coughed harshly, her voice raspy, her breathing rapid, then abruptly weakened. "Lily!" Alexander cried out, tightening his grip, horrified as he watched his daughter slipping away from his arms. In that instant, everything inside him collapsed, and the silence finally shattered. He ran straight to the car, opened the backseat door, and laid his daughter on her side so she could breathe more easily. "Claudia, move aside." His voice was hoarse. Sandra froze at the doorway. Claudia called after him, forcing her voice to sound calm. "Please calm down, I can explain." Alexander did not look back. The engine roared, and the car sped out through the gate. At the emergency room of St. Mary's, the white lights shone down on Lily's pale skin. A nurse placed an oxygen mask over her face and checked her pulse. The door swung open, and a woman in a white coat walked quickly in. Her brown hair was tied back neatly, her gaze calm yet sharp. "I am Dr. Grace Whitman, pediatrician and rehabilitation specialist," she introduced briefly, then bent down beside Lily, her voice gentle but firm. "Lily, sweetheart, listen to me. Breathe in slowly, breathe out slowly." Alexander stood next to the bed, his hand never leaving his daughter's tiny hand. He tried to steady himself as he listened to the monitor pick up a steadier rhythm of her heartbeat. Claudia appeared at the end of the hallway, looking uneasy. "You see, I told you the girl was weak. You didn't believe me. Now she's in the hospital." Alexander tightened his grip on his briefcase handle and said nothing. He kept his eyes only on his daughter. Grace gently pulled back Lily's sleeve to check, then frowned slightly. She shifted to lift the girl's back, pausing for a moment as her eyes lingered. "Nurse, record the bruises on the outer side of the right arm, old yellow bruising around the shoulder blade, and fresh bruising on the left rib area." She looked up, speaking softly to Alexander, her tone steady yet heavy with meaning. "These marks cannot all be from an accident." Alexander froze. "What are you saying?" Grace lowered her voice further. The color, the spread, and the locations show that they occurred at different times. Some have partially healed, some are very recent. I need to ask more about her recent activities. Claudia interjected quickly, clutching her chest. The child often hurts herself. She's reckless, always slipping out of her wheelchair. I told you already. Grace met Claudia's eyes directly, her expression calm. Repeated falls on the same areas of the body is something we must examine carefully. Here, we put the child's safety first. Lily slowly opened her eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, her lips trembling. Alexander bent down. "I'm here. Just keep breathing steady." He watched her chest rise and fall, droplets of water still clinging to her hair. In his mind, a memory surged. That night years ago in the hospital, his wife's hand slipping from his, her voice faint as smoke. "Promise me, no matter what, you will protect her." That promise now echoed like a painful reminder. Out in the hallway, Sandra sat hunched in a chair, phone pressed to her ear, whispering urgently, "Ma'am, we have to cover this up, otherwise it will blow up." On the other end, Claudia's voice was sharp. "Keep your mouth shut. I'll take care of the rest." Grace signaled the nurse to lower the oxygen flow, then pulled the blanket up over Lily's chest. "We will run additional imaging tests, measure oxygen saturation, and monitor her for a few more hours." She turned to Alexander. "In the meantime, you may stay by her side to keep her calm." Alexander sat down and held his daughter's hand. He looked at the scattered bruises like unanswered question marks. Pieces of memory stacked on top of each other, from the yard to the hospital. The smell of cold water in her hair, Claudia's voice on the porch, Lily's frightened eyes. A powerful suspicion rose within him, sharp with guilt. He had been absent too long, too ready to believe in an easy picture of peace. Claudia stepped closer, laid her hand on his shoulder, and tried to keep her voice gentle. "Alex, I know you're exhausted. I will take better care of Lily. What happened today was only a misunderstanding." Alexander quietly brushed her hand away. "Right now, Lily needs calm." The door opened again. A nurse came in with the preliminary results. Grace glanced through them quickly, then nodded to her team. "Stable for now, but we need more scans. I'll arrange that." She looked at Alexander, weighing each word. "I know this is a painful moment, but to protect Lily, sometimes we have to face what we don't want to hear." Alexander nodded, his eyes never leaving his daughter. "If I have to hear it, I will, as long as it keeps my child safe." Lily turned her face toward him, her voice faint as a breath. "Daddy, don't go." "I'm here," Alexander said, his warm hand resting on her forehead. "I'll be right here." Out in the hallway, footsteps passed back and forth, short commands called out. Sandra kept her head down, her phone clutched in her palm, stealing a glance through the glass before turning away. Claudia leaned against the wall, her eyes rimmed red, letting out a quiet sigh. On the surface, it was worry, but deep in her gaze there lingered a mark that was harder to read. Grace returned and stood in front of Alexander. She placed a steady hand on his shoulder, her voice low and clear. "Mr. Hayes, I need to speak with you alone. There is something you must be strong enough to hear." Grace gave a slight nod as a signal, then led Alexander into the adjoining consultation room. The door closed behind them, the light inside softer. She opened the file, spread the scans and notes across the table. Her finger touched each marked area, her voice low but firm. "Look here. The bruise on the right arm has a faint yellow shade, which means it has been there for weeks. And this one, on the left side of the ribs, is fresh, consistent with a recent impact. On her back, there are also finger-shaped marks, as if she had been grabbed and pulled. These injuries did not occur at the same time, nor do they match the pattern of a single fall." Alexander stared at the silent patches of color on the scans, as if they were showing him the weight of his own absence. "You mean someone did this to her, more than once?" Grace nodded. "I am very sorry to have to say this. I will document everything in the medical report and notify the hospital's child protection unit. The priority is Lily's safety." Alexander clenched his hands. He could hear the steady hum of the air conditioner, yet his heartbeat was unsteady. Images from the yard yesterday came rushing back, along with countless mornings when Claudia's voice had been so light, almost casual. "Don't worry about anything. Go on your business trip. I'll take care of things here at home." His vision blurred with tears. "I believed everything was fine. I stayed away too long." The door swung open. Claudia stepped in holding a cup of coffee, her blonde hair neatly brushed, her eyes shimmering as though she had been crying. "Alex, you're here. I just checked on Lily. She's asleep. Please don't blame yourself. I'll take better care of her." Alexander looked up, his voice hard. "Take better care? What did I just see at home?" Claudia froze for a second, then quickly composed herself. "You think I would hurt her? I've been with her every single day. She was born fragile. She often bumps into the edge of the table. She slips from her wheelchair. You're not home to see it." Grace interjected, her tone measured. "I'm not drawing conclusions about motive. I'm presenting medical findings. These injuries happened at different times, in unusual places. We need to protect Lily." Claudia turned toward Grace, her lips pressed tight. "You make it sound as if I hurt her." "No," Grace said slowly. "I'm saying what we observed does not match a series of natural accidents, and we have a duty to report it." Alexander's phone vibrated. The screen lit up with Marcus's name. He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Alex, listen to me." Marcus's voice was calm, carrying a faintly forced familiarity. "Lily might bruise easily because of mild anemia or due to medication. It's not unusual. Don't misunderstand Claudia. I already spoke with a medical friend, and they said children born weak often bruise like this. It's normal." Alexander held the phone slightly away from his ear, his eyes still fixed on Grace. "I will talk later. Now is not the time." Marcus lowered his voice. "Don't let the media catch a whiff of this. Our family needs peace. I'll call you back." The call ended. Alexander set the phone down on the table, a wave of discomfort spreading from his temples down his neck. He turned toward Claudia. "I don't care about the media. I care about my daughter." Claudia hid behind a sigh. "I care too. You have to trust your wife." "Trust," Alexander said slowly, "is built by how adults treat a child when no one is watching." In the hallway, hurried footsteps passed by. Sandra sat pressed into a chair, her phone clutched in her hand, eyes darting nervously toward the room before quickly turning away. Alexander caught her shadow flicker through the glass panel, and irritation surged inside him with a single clear thought. He turned back to Grace. "Please record everything in the file, every detail. I want a copy as soon as possible." "I will," Grace replied. "Tonight we still have a few light assessments. Lily is stabilizing, but she needs monitoring." Alexander rose to his feet. "I'm going back to my daughter." He paused in front of Claudia. "Do not go into the room alone when I'm not there." Claudia's eyes widened, her voice rising. "Are you forbidding me? I am protecting Lily." The hospital room was so quiet that the child's breathing could be heard. Lily lay on her side, a faint blush still on her cheek. Alexander sat down, pressing his palm gently against her forehead. That fragile warmth touched the deepest part of him. "Daddy is here," he whispered, guilt flooding through him like a tide. "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner." The sky outside darkened. The hospital windows took on the deep blue of the city evening. Claudia left to get some things, and Sandra disappeared from the hallway. Grace stopped by again, adjusted the monitor, then instructed a nurse before leaving for the shift change. Alexander sat alone, the bedside lamp casting light over the papers on the table. He picked up his phone, scrolling through the contacts, stopping at a name he had never thought he would dial at this moment. He pressed the number. 2 rings. Detective Maria Santos, a calm, firm female voice answered. "This is Alexander Hayes," he said, his eyes still on the small hand resting in sleep. "I need the truth, no matter how brutal it is." On the other end, silence lasted a few seconds. Then came the faint sound of a pen tapping against a desk. "Mr. Hayes, are you reporting suspected child abuse?" "Yes, I witnessed it. And the hospital just discovered several injuries from earlier times. Do you have video, recordings, or physical evidence?" "I have my memory, I have the doctors, and I have my daughter." "All right," Maria said crisply. "Keep all medical documents. take photos when permitted, and do not confront anyone directly when it's just the two adults. I will open a case file, and I will call the hospital tonight. Do not leave your child's side, understood? I'm not leaving, Alexander replied, his voice dropping. But I need to know where this is going. A soft, almost weary breath came through the line. Then Maria's voice sharpened, cold and precise as a thin blade. If you truly want the truth, be prepared to lose more than you think. After that late-night call, Alexander remained by the hospital bed for a long time. Lily slept peacefully, her small hand still loosely gripping his finger. By morning, after completing the tests and confirming her stability, Dr. Grace allowed Lily to be discharged for outpatient care, reminding him of the schedule for follow-up visits and therapy. Keep her environment calm, she instructed, and always keep her within sight. Alexander nodded. He carried his daughter to the car, silently vowing that this time he would not leave her side, not even for a heartbeat. When they arrived home, Alexander laid Lily to rest in the reading room, a quiet space with soft light and a comfortable armchair. He turned on his phone's camera and sent a message to Detective Maria Santos. Less than an hour later, Maria arrived. She was about 42, tall and lean, her hair tied low, her eyes sharp and alert. She introduced herself briefly and listened as Alexander recounted every detail before the hospital and the doctor's words. "May I survey the house?" Maria asked. "You have the right to place cameras in shared areas, and you should do it today." Alexander led her through the hallway, the living room, and the backyard. Maria took notes, checked corners, and pointed out spots with the best visibility. "This is only the beginning," she said softly when they returned to the reading room. "They have hidden more than you think." The doorbell rang. A middle-aged woman stood on the porch, clutching a bag of files. She looked around nervously, as if afraid of being seen, then said quietly, "I'm Helen Ward, a former employee. I can't stay silent anymore." Alexander invited her inside. Helen opened her phone and played a recording. Through the speaker came Claudia's cold voice. "Useless thing. I don't want to see your face again. Stop crying, get up." Then came the sound of shuffling, followed by a wheelchair hitting the edge of a table. Alexander froze, his hands trembled. His eyes burned red as he remembered the many times Lily had reached out to hug his neck, only for Claudia to block her, saying, "Let your father rest," or "Don't cling to him." Every detail suddenly snapped back together, forming a picture impossible to deny. Maria took the phone, backed up the file, and asked a few short questions about time and context. Helen answered clearly, though her voice cracked with emotion. "I'm sorry I stayed silent for so long," she said, rising quickly. "But now, I will testify." Meanwhile, in the east wing of the house, Claudia closed the door to her office. Marcus was already waiting, glasses off, his voice lowered. "If he finds out, we lose everything." Claudia gripped the edge of the desk. "You think I don't know? I've kept this house in order." But now, Alexander came back unexpectedly. Marcus leaned back, disturbingly calm. "Don't worry. I've already taken care of the press. They'll write it our way. We'll spin the story into a paranoid single father, claim the child was frail from birth. As for finances, leave that to me." Claudia stared straight into his eyes. "As long as no one touches my share." By the afternoon, Alexander was obliged to attend a fundraising gala for the hospital sponsored by his company. He brought Lily with him, accompanied by a home nurse for support. Maria came too, keeping her distance. The room buzzed with chatter, clinking glasses, and the constant flash of cameras. In one corner, Nora Blake, a friend of Claudia, infamous for her cutting remarks, glanced at the wheelchair and smirked. "That child is a curse," she said bluntly, loud enough for several nearby guests to hear. "Keeping her in the house only brings bad luck." Alexander turned back immediately. His eyes were blazing. He stepped closer, his voice low but every word clear. "What did you just say?" Nora froze for a moment, forcing a faint smile. "Oh, I was only joking. You know how parties are." "There are children here," Alexander continued, without raising his voice. "You have the right to your opinion, but you do not have the right to throw filth onto a child." The air around them grew heavy. From a distance, Maria silently took notes. Nora turned away, her face twisting for an instant. That night, when Lily was already home and asleep in the reading room, Alexander finished installing 3 cameras in the hallway, the foyer, and the backyard, following Maria's instructions. He checked the signal on his phone, lowered the brightness, then pulled a chair right up to his daughter's doorway. "I'm here," he whispered. Lily shifted in her sleep, her breathing becoming steadier. Close to midnight, Alexander's phone vibrated softly. A message from Maria appeared. "I received the audio file. The case file has been created. Stay calm. Do not leave the area." He typed a short reply. "I'm right outside the door." A faint creak came from the wooden floor in the hallway. Alexander lifted his head. The reading room door was still ajar, the soft yellow light glowing inside. On his phone screen, the foyer camera showed Claudia walking slowly, her hair tied up neatly, a glass of water in her hand. Sandra followed behind, carrying a stack of towels. Alexander shot to his feet. He didn't want to make noise, but he didn't take his eyes off the screen. Claudia stopped at the reading room doorway, leaning down to look at Lily. Her voice was soft, sweet as honey. "Sleep well, sweetheart." Then she stepped back and motioned to Sandra. The two walked down the hallway. Alexander exhaled, about to sit down again, when his phone vibrated once more. The backyard camera had just detected motion. He opened it. The frame glimmered with faint garden lights. Claudia had rolled Lily's wheelchair out onto the porch, running her hand along the wheel, as if measuring the step's height. Sandra stood beside her, smirking, whispering something. A moment later, the image jolted slightly. The wheelchair suddenly tipped forward as if shoved on purpose. The faint scrape of the wheels against the wooden step could be heard. Claudia glanced around, her lips curling into a thin smile. The back of Alexander's neck went cold. He switched back to the foyer camera just as Claudia wheeled the empty chair inside again, testing angles, then pausing for several seconds right in front of the reading room. Her hand rested on the armrest, her fingers rubbing it as though weighing a decision. Sandra stood close behind, her mouth tilted in a smirk, giving a silent nod like a signal. The screen flickered once more as the sensor adjusted. In the hallway view, Claudia planted her feet, gripped the armrest, then gave it a hard practiced shove, forward a motion too smooth to be accidental. The empty wheelchair shot ahead, slammed into the wall, and bounced back. Alexander clenched his phone tightly. His breath came short. He stepped to the doorway, his eyes still locked on the screen. In the corner, the backyard camera caught another shove, Sandra covering her mouth to laugh. The frame froze on Claudia's face, tilted upward, cold as stone. And just as Alexander moved his foot, ready to rush out, his phone vibrated again. The hallway camera flickered, then came into focus, showing Claudia placing her hand firmly on the wheelchair, angling it toward the reading room door, preparing a push aimed straight at Lily's bed. The wheelchair slammed against the wall, echoing with a dry thud. Alexander rushed through the doorway, blocking the path and yanking the brakes before it could roll any further. He snapped his head around, his eyes locking fiercely on Claudia. "What are you doing here at midnight?" Sandra hid a faint smile, stepping back slightly. Lily stirred in her room, her breathing steady. Alexander tightened his grip on the wheelchair handle, lowering his voice so his daughter wouldn't wake. "Get out of the hallway, now." The next morning, the living room was brightly lit. The large screen reflected the hardened expression on Alexander's face. He pressed play. The footage from the night before rolled. Claudia tugging at the chair, Sandra standing nearby. A sudden hard push, the wheels slamming into the wall, then a second shove in the backyard. Not a word was spoken. When the screen went dark, Alexander looked directly at her. "Explain this." Claudia froze for several seconds. Then her eyes suddenly welled up. She dabbed at the tears with her hand, her voice trembling as though wounded. "Do you really believe some sneaky recording more than me?" "I pushed the chair outside to clean it," Sandra spilled water. "Edited videos can destroy an innocent person, Alex." She placed a hand on her chest, her breathing quick. "I'm your wife. Why don't you believe me?" Alexander didn't shift his gaze. "This isn't some sneaky recording. This is the truth, and you will pay the price." He pulled out the memory card, slipped it into his pocket, and sent a quick message to Detective Maria Santos. I have video evidence." The doorbell rang. Marcus stepped in as if he had been waiting, holding a folder in his hand, a thin smile on his face. "We don't need to dramatize everything." He tilted his head toward Claudia, then turned back to Alexander. "I've been working with a few friends in the media. You're stressed, sleep-deprived. Outsiders will misinterpret. Let me handle the press. Emphasize that Lily is naturally frail, prone to accidents, and you've been overwhelmed by work." Alexander glanced at the folder, not touching it. "I don't need press management. I need the truth." Marcus shrugged. "The truth always has layers, but reputation only has one. If this story comes out the wrong way, your company's stock will crash." He paused. "Let me handle it." By noon, Alexander's phone buzzed nonstop. Several tabloids splashed headlines across their sites. "Businessman Hayes loses control, fabricates abuse claims. Insider reveals, stepmother secretly recorded, family falling apart from paranoia." Claudia carried in a cup of tea, setting it gently on the table, sighing as if deeply wounded. "I told you I would stay silent to protect you, but if you keep going like this, the whole family will drown." Alexander turned off the screen and stood. "I won't bargain with my daughter's safety." That afternoon, Maria arrived. She wore a dark, long coat, a folder tucked under her arm, her eyes unwavering. "I need to speak with Sandra." Sandra was escorted into the study, barely able to sit straight, her hands tightly clasped together. Maria switched on her recorder, her voice steady. "You were present last night. Before that, had you ever seen this child being shoved, splashed with water, or left without food?" Sandra swallowed hard. I was only following the schedule. I didn't know." Maria didn't rush. "Here's an audio recording provided by a former staff member." She played a short clip, Claudia's voice scolding, followed by the sharp sound of a wheelchair hitting something. Sandra shrank back, her eyes fixed on the floor. I wasn't there when that happened." "But you were here when other things happened," Maria said slowly, "and you know more than you're admitting." A soft knock came at the door. A woman with streaks of gray in her hair stood outside, hands clenched, her eyes firm. "My name is Martha Bell. I work the day shift as a housekeeper. I heard little Lily crying many times. One afternoon, she begged for water and no one gave her any. I can't stay silent anymore." The air in the room shifted. Sandra covered her face, her shoulders shaking. Claudia, standing outside, had gone pale, gripping the wooden doorframe until her knuckles turned white. News spread faster than expected. By late afternoon, neighbors began gathering at the gates of the mansion. Hand-painted signs were held high. "Justice for Lily. Children need safety, not cruelty." A mother with a child by her side stood against the fence, her voice steady as if speaking to someone inside. "She's not wrong because she's in a wheelchair. The wrong is in the adults who are cruel." Alexander stepped through the gate, paused for a beat, and nodded in gratitude. He didn't want to make a spectacle, but he knew the weight of community pressure could pull a child out of the shadows. Inside, Marcus strode up to Claudia, his voice low and sharp. "If he pushes this to court, it's over." Claudia bit her lip. "You said you had the press under control." "I've handled the surface," Marcus replied, "but inside, we need to lock everything down." He pulled out his phone, making a quick call. "Dean, check the transfers again, especially the trust fund. Make sure my name and my cousins never show up anywhere." Maria had just left her office when she met Alexander in the hallway. She spoke quietly. "We have a witness statement. We have recordings, and we have video. I'll request an emergency protection order for Lily. Don't let anyone be alone with her, not even for a few minutes." "I'm not leaving," Alexander answered. He glanced through the glass pane. Lily was drawing a tiny flower on a sheet of paper, her hand still trembling. "When will this end?" "When the truth is heavy enough to rip the mask away," Maria said, her tone steady, neither cold nor warm. "And it's getting heavier." Night fell, wind lashing through the trees outside. Alexander checked the locks again, kissed his daughter's forehead, and sat watch in the armchair. The phone on the table buzzed. A call from Maria. He picked up on the very first ring. "Mr. Hayes," Maria's voice was crisp and firm. "We just uncovered secret transfer documents. under the name of Dean Foster, the family's asset manager. Part of the estate has been packaged to move into a shell company. This is their Achilles heel. The house seemed to fall even quieter. Alexander gripped the phone tightly, his eyes drifting toward his daughter's room. The next morning, after Maria's call, Alexander handed her a copy of the documents in the courthouse hallway. He carried Lily in his arms, her wheelchair rolling behind him. Maria gave a short nod. Today, let the truth speak. The courtroom doors opened, and the sound of the gavel echoed. Order, please. Outside the doors, camera flashes went off. Claudia appeared in a black dress, a tissue in her hand, her eyes red and swollen. She stood before the cameras, her voice trembling. I love Lily as if she were my own daughter. I would never hurt her. Marcus walked beside her, gently holding her elbow, signaling her not to say more. They stepped inside, avoiding Alexander's gaze. Inside the courtroom, Judge Patricia Coleman, around 60, stern in demeanor but calm in her eyes, sat at the bench. At the defense table sat Claudia's attorney, Victor Hale, dressed in a dark suit, thin glasses, a cold air of confidence about him. In the back row, Dr. Grace sat next to Maria. In front, Alexander placed Lily into her seat, whispering softly, "Daddy's here." The clerk read the opening remarks briefly. Judge Coleman looked around. Today, we are here to examine charges of child abuse and conspiracy to seize assets. Counsel, please proceed. Victor rose first. Your Honor, the defendant is a devoted wife, falsely accused by her husband who is attempting to manipulate property for his own gain. The plaintiff has endured prolonged stress with a documented history of psychological instability. These so-called evidences are the product of paranoia. Alexander lifted his head, his hand tightening to steady himself. Judge Coleman tilted her head. Do you have medical documentation to support that claim, counselor? Victor slid a packet of papers forward. A preliminary assessment of occupational stress and sleep disorder, which may cause distorted perception. Maria raised an eyebrow, making notes. Judge Coleman flipped through the pages quickly, then set them down. The court will take this under consideration. Call your medical witness. Dr. Grace stepped up to the stand. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore in, then faced the court directly. I am Dr. Grace Whitman, pediatrician and rehabilitation specialist. Lily shows multiple bruises in different stages of healing. Her right arm, her shoulder blade, her left ribs. This distribution is inconsistent with a single accidental fall. There are also grip marks consistent with someone pulling or grabbing her. A child could not have caused these repeated injuries in these particular locations on her own. Victor approached, smiling politely. Doctor, isn't it common for disabled children to bump into things while moving around? Yes, but the injury patterns would be different, Grace replied evenly. Here, the markings indicate outside force. Could it be that the caregiver was careless? Possibly careless, one time, Grace clarified. Not a repeated sequence of injuries. Victor clicked his tongue. Doctor, you are drawing many conclusions from limited data. Grace looked directly at him. I am not concluding intent. I am presenting medical findings. And the medical findings say this is not a case of repeated accidental falls. Judge Coleman made her notes, nodding slightly. Thank you, doctor. Call the next witness. A middle-aged woman rose from the audience. I am Linda Green, the neighbor across the street, she introduced herself, her voice firm. I saw it with my own eyes. One afternoon, she poured cold water over the little girl right in the yard. The child coughed and begged for air, and she scolded her. I wanted to call the police, but I had no evidence. Today, I have to speak. Victor cut in. Mrs. Green, did you record it? No, Linda answered, without hesitation. But I have eyes, and I am old enough to know the difference between discipline and cruelty. The courtroom buzzed. Judge Coleman struck the gavel. Order. She turned to Alexander. Mr. Hayes, would you like to speak? Alexander stepped forward, carrying Lily. He set her against the stand, his hand steadying her back. His voice was low, trembling slightly. I missed too many years. I was busy. I thought providing was enough. I believed our home was safe, but I saw it with my own eyes. I heard my daughter say, Dad, I can't breathe," when water was poured over her. I took her to the hospital, and the doctor told me those injuries had happened more than once. From today on, no matter what happens out there, I will never let anyone hurt my daughter again." Claudia burst into sobs, staring at Alexander. "Do you really want to destroy me like this? I took care of her every single meal." Victor placed a hand on her shoulder, motioning for her to sit, then turned back to the court. "Your Honor, this is dramatization from a guilty father. The video the plaintiff presented was secretly recorded, spliced together. The press has also reported that he is losing control." Maria rose and requested to speak. "I am Detective Maria Santos. The video was obtained from an internal system legally installed by the homeowner in common areas. Additionally, we have audio recordings of the defendant insulting the child, and there are documents of a secret transfer under the name of Dean Foster, the property manager, proving motive." Marcus froze in his seat, his eyes darting quickly. Victor's tone shifted, restrained for a beat. "The police have not yet verified the origin of those documents." "We verified them this morning," Maria replied, handing a sealed envelope to the court clerk. Judge Coleman looked around the room, her voice calm yet unyielding. "The court will accept and review for examination. Now, the court requires the audio files to be played." She looked at the clerk. "Recording dated May 12, on file." The room fell silent. The playback crackled. A chair scraped sharply, then a woman's voice rang out, clear and cold. "Useless. I'm sick of looking at you. This child should just die already." All whispers stopped. Linda raised a hand to her mouth. Alexander's grip tightened on Lily's shoulder, and the girl shrank back, her eyes wide. Victor froze for a fraction, then forced composure. The audio could have been manipulated. Judge Coleman lifted her hand, signaling to stop. She tilted her head toward the defendant. Claudia sat motionless, a tissue slipping from her fingers to the floor, her eyes suddenly hollow. The gavel struck once. "Order." Judge Coleman looked down firmly and spoke slowly, each word falling heavy into the thick air. "Play it again from the beginning." The playback echoed a second time, cold and sharp like the tip of a knife. In the courtroom, no one moved. When the recording finally ended, Judge Patricia Coleman leaned back slightly, her eyes sweeping across every face before striking the gavel once. "The court has heard enough." She signaled the clerk to seal the device, then turned to the defendant's bench. "Do the defendants wish to make any final statement?" Claudia gripped a crumpled tissue in her hand. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting as if searching for an escape. I only wanted to discipline. I love Lily." Her voice cracked, but no one believed her anymore. Marcus sat stiff, his fingers locked tightly together, while Victor Hale kept his head down, busy scribbling notes, carefully avoiding eye contact. In the back row, a middle-aged man in a gray suit stood when his name was called. "I am Dean Foster, the family's estate manager," he introduced himself, sweat breaking across his forehead. Maria submitted another stack of files. Dean hesitated, opened his mouth, then closed it again, as though he knew every exit had already been sealed. Judge Coleman exhaled slowly. After reviewing the witness testimonies, medical conclusions, the video evidence, and financial documents, this court rules as follows. Her voice was steady and deliberate, each word falling like weight onto the tile floor. Claudia Reed is guilty of child abuse and conspiracy to seize assets. Marcus Reed and Dean Foster are guilty of financial fraud. The record regarding attorney Victor Hale will be referred to the State Bar for disciplinary review for obstruction of justice and intentional misrepresentation before this court. A wave of whispers broke out, then silenced when the gavel struck. Claudia shot up to her feet, taking half a step toward Alexander as if to plead, but his eyes froze her in place. "Do not come near my child again." His words were quiet but absolute. Claudia staggered, forced back down by court officers. Marcus clenched his jaw without speaking, while Dean bowed his head, shoulders sagging in defeat. Victor leaned urgently toward his assistant, whispering, but no one paid attention anymore. The proceedings moved to preliminary sentencing. Claudia lowered her head as the judge read out her prison term and the restraining order forbidding her from contacting Lily. Marcus and Dean received their sentences for fraud, with illegally transferred assets ordered to be recovered. Judge Coleman struck the gavel one final time. In the best interest of the child, this court issues an emergency protective order. Lily Hayes shall remain in the custody of her father until a long-term ruling is made by family court. The courthouse hallway suddenly grew crowded with people. A group of mothers walked up to Alexander and Lily, their voices soft yet warm. "You are very brave." Lily gave a small nod, clutching at her father's collar. At the doorway, Sandra Collins stepped out, her face drained of color. She had just signed a cooperation agreement in the investigation, hoping to lessen her sentence. As she tried to slip past, shouts crashed over her like a wave. "Traitor! Cruel woman!" A few pointed fingers at her. Sandra pulled her collar higher, trembling, avoiding every gaze, then lowered her head and walked on as if fleeing from her own conscience. Outside in the courtyard, cameras flashed without pause. Alexander carried Lily, his back shielding her from the wind. A reporter pushed forward with a microphone, but Maria stepped in, her voice steady. "Please, leave the child in peace." They made their way down the stone steps. The New York sky stretched clear and blue, the breeze carrying the scent of fresh leaves. "Are you all right?" Alexander asked softly. Lily pressed her cheek against his shoulder and whispered, "I'm tired, but I'm not afraid." Near the flower bed, a young woman flipped open her phone, her voice sharp with excitement. "Nora, look at the news. The brands are pulling out, all of them." Headlines flashed across the screen. Nora Blake boycotted for mocking children with disabilities. Every partner terminates cooperation. Nora sat slumped on the distant steps. Her lipstick faded under the sun as her friends scattered as though they had never known her. "Just one sentence," she muttered. But she herself knew that sometimes one sentence was enough to reveal a person's true self. A court clerk hurried by and handed Maria a sealed envelope. She opened it quickly, scanned a few lines, then looked up at Alexander with a firm nod. "The Bar Association has opened emergency disciplinary proceedings against Victor Hale. His law license is suspended as of today." Alexander said nothing, only gave her hand a light squeeze of gratitude. He knew justice was never fast enough, but this time it had arrived in time to save a child. Claudia was escorted through a side corridor. She glanced back, her eyes brushing over Lily. There were no more tears, no more excuses, only an empty void where a perfectly false face had once been. Marcus walked behind her, his head bowed, handcuffs catching the sunlight, while Dean gave a slow shake of his head, as if to say, "If only." But every if only had already come too late. Alexander carried Lily across the sunlit courtyard. People stepped aside for them, and several women bent down to greet the child, placing a small daisy in her hand. "Keep this," one gentle voice said, "to remember that there are still good people in this world." Lily looked at the daisy, her fingers trembling, then clutched it together with the stuffed bear that had stayed with her through all the darkest days. When they reached the car, Alexander paused, opened the door, and spread a soft blanket across the back seat. He set his daughter down, buckled the seatbelt, then sat beside her, letting her rest her head against his shoulder. The press kept snapping pictures from a distance, but inside the car there was a rare circle of peace. "Do you want to go home?" he asked in a low voice. "We'll make some soup, read a chapter of a book, and I won't be leaving anymore." Lily lifted her eyes to him. They shimmered with tears, but the panic was gone. She pressed her lips together as though weighing something huge for a 7-year-old. "Dad." She paused, leaned closer, and whispered as if afraid to lose the courage she had just found. "Dad, can I smile again?" Alexander pulled her tight into his arms. He wanted to say yes, wanted to smile right away so she would believe, but his throat caught. Heat rose behind his eyes. He nodded again and again, his lips trembling, his hand stroking her hair in steady rhythm, as though if he slowed even a little, the whole world might collapse. And as the clicking of cameras faded in the distance, the car started softly, carrying father and daughter away from the courthouse, toward a home still unfinished but already glowing with light. On the first morning after the trial, sunlight filtered through the curtains. It was no longer the cold light of hospital hallways or the courtroom, but warmer and gentler. In the rehabilitation room, Lily stood inside the training frame, her small hands gripping the parallel bars. Her legs trembled, her face tightened with effort, but her eyes were glowing. Alexander stood close by, his hand not touching her but always ready to catch her. "Doctor." Grace Whitman nodded, her voice gentle. "One step at a time, Lily. You don't need to be fast. You just need to believe that you can. One step, then another." Beads of sweat formed on the little girl's forehead, but her lips pressed together, refusing to give up. Alexander tightened his fist, his eyes shining with faith. When Lily finally reached the end mark, he knelt down to meet her gaze and whispered softly, "You did it." Exhausted, Lily managed a fragile smile. For the first time, it wasn't a forced one, but a faint light breaking into a soul once buried in darkness. Day after day, Alexander reorganized his life from the ground up. He withdrew from unnecessary projects, handed over operations to his management team, and kept only one priority, Lily. In the evenings, he sat by her bed, reading aloud pages from children's books his late wife used to love. When Lily burst out laughing at a silly line of dialogue, Alexander suddenly realized that he too was learning how to laugh again. They cooked together in the kitchen. Lily sat on a high chair, chopping vegetables with a small plastic knife, while Alexander stirred the pot of soup. "Dad, you put in too much salt," Lily grimaced after tasting it. Alexander chuckled. "Then you're the head chef, and I'm just the assistant." On afternoons, he pushed her wheelchair around the neighborhood. Neighbors greeted them, no longer with curious stares, but with warmth in their eyes. An elderly woman handed Lily a handkerchief, embroidered with daisies, and whispered, "Keep this, sweetheart, so you'll always remember that you are loved." A community gathering was held in the small town square. Children ran around carrying wildflowers. When Lily appeared, the whole group rushed toward her. A little boy handed her a sunflower and said, "Here, this is for you, so you can always stay strong." Lily smiled, her eyes curving, the first truly radiant smile after so many long months. From a distance, Alexander stood with his hands trembling slightly, overwhelmed by how simple happiness could be. In the crowd, Judge Patricia Coleman was also present. She wore a modest coat, no longer carrying the sternness she showed in court. She walked closer to Alexander, her eyes gentle. "Justice may be slow, but it always comes," she said softly. Alexander lowered his head, his voice deep. "Thank you. Because of you, she finally has the chance to live a real life." Patricia placed a hand on his shoulder. "Number. It's because you stood up at the right moment." That night, when the noise had quieted down, Alexander sat in the armchair in Lily's room. The room was no longer a silent space filled with fear, but a place alive with drawings, teddy bears, and the warm glow of a bedside lamp. He lifted Lily into bed and tucked the blanket carefully around her. The little girl looked up at her father, her blue eyes shining. Alexander laid his hand gently on her hair, his deep voice carrying a faint tremor. "You don't need your legs to prove your worth. You have value simply because you are you." Lily bit her lip, her eyes glistening. A faint smile passed across her face, then she whispered, her voice small but clear, "I know, Dad, because you're always here." Alexander held her close and closed his eyes. And in that room filled with soft light, a circle of healing came to completion, not through the downfall of the wicked, but through the new smile blooming on the face of a child once lost in darkness. Dear friends, the story has come to an end, but its echoes still linger in each of our hearts. A disabled child, once tormented by cruelty, was finally defended by her own father and brought into the light of justice. We are reminded of a timeless truth. The wicked may hide for a while, but in the end they will be punished, and the good, even if they quietly endure suffering, will one day be justly rewarded. Lily, the little girl in this story, had to endure dark and painful days. Yet in the end she found her smile again, and peace within her father's arms. This is living proof that genuine love holds the power to heal every wound, whether of the body or the spirit. My dear friends, as you follow these heartwarming and moving stories here on Story for Heart, my hope has always been not only to bring you moments of deep reflection, but also to leave you with faith that in any circumstance, the light of justice and humanity will never fade. So what do you think about this story? If you were in Alexander's place, would you have the courage to stand up, to protect your child, to defend the truth? And if you ever witness injustice, would you be ready to raise your voice? Before we finish, I would like to ask you something personal. How are you doing today? I hope these stories I share can warm your heart, even just a little. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments, and tell me, from 1 to 10, how many points would you give today's story? See you again in the next episodes of Story for Heart, where every story carries a ray of healing light.